The context of the Nigerian woman in urban communities is progressing, but across the board, the average Nigerian woman is living below the poverty line. On this special edition of Rubbing Minds, we're celebrating International Women's Month throughout the month of March. And today I'm going to be talking to two formidable First Ladies on the state of women's rights. We're going to be discussing the girl child and also her access to education. And we will also be discussing the issue of gender-based violence in our community. This special edition is powered by Lipton, and Lipton is raising a mug to her.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.
Welcome, Your Excellencies. Thank you for so much for sitting down and having this conversation with me. Happy International Women's Month.
And you too,
Thank you.
And it's great to be here.
You know, it's an interesting theme because this month is talking about choose to challenge. And throughout the month, we're doing different activities that we're asking, what exactly are our communities, our society, government doing to choose to challenge and also to advance the cause of women. Last year was a very hard year for us. It was a COVID year. And I want to go back and talk a little bit about the initiative that the Nigerian Governor's Wives Against Gender-Based Violence started. And I want to find out, what inspired you to come together to say, we're going to say no to gender-based violence. We can start with you, Erelu.
Thank you very much, Bolanle. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting us. As you just said, last year was a very difficult year, particularly difficult for women around the world. Here in Nigeria, because of the COVID-19 lockdowns, a lot of women and girls were trapped in their homes and in their communities with predators and violators. And every day we kept getting reports of one form of sexual violence attack against women and girls or the other. I believe it all came to a head when we heard of the news of the rape and murder of Uwela from Edo State, the student. And by that time, I think a lot of us were just fed up. And so I spoke to my colleagues and the governor's wives, and we agreed that we need to do something. We need to speak up. And so the first thing we did was to put together a memo to our husbands at the Nigerian Governors Forum, demanding that they please declare a state of emergency against all forms of gender-based violence. Before then, we've been talking about it. Civil society organizations have been running campaigns trying to draw attention. But at that point, we felt that we needed to take some actions that were out of the ordinary. Thankfully, our husbands listened to us, and the state of emergency was declared. And one of the things about that was the governors made a commitment that they would all go back to their respective states and speed up the passing of laws to protect women and children from violence. Right. And where laws were in place, they would ensure that there's political will to implement those laws. And since then, our network, Nigerian Governors' Wives Against Gender-Based Violence, has gone from strength to strength, and we continue to work on these issues at a national level and in our respective states.
Yeah, and I have to commend you because the truth about it is I think last year was a awakening for all of us that this is an issue that is not going away anytime soon if we don't address it head on. Dr. Bagdo, I want to go to you and talk about, what the VAP Act looks like, what the law looks like in your state. Because you and I have had a conversation about this, that sometimes you have to go around to pass an act that might not work exactly how we think of it should work in the South.
Mm. Well, the VAP Act is the same as all the other states, but there have been deliberations on it. It's been submitted to the State House of Assembly, and there have been various stakeholders that have come together to talk about what works and what doesn't work in our cultural and religious context. Mm-hmm. And all those adaptations have been taken into consideration. The other important step that we've made is that the penal code, remember that there's a Nigerian penal code that exists in the northern part of Nigeria. It's a law that it was in existence for so many years, and a lot of them are quite outdated and archaic. So that has been updated too, and now it's going to be unified across all the states that practice that code, and there will be uniformity, which means that the penalty for rape in Kebbi is the same as the penalty for rape in Borno, and there's less confusion for the magistrates. The main thing that we've been able to do is to bring in the Council of Ulamas, who are the religious leaders that usually oppose the laws. But in this particular case, with the VAP Act, there is really no bone of contention, because the main thing they would think about is Islam says this and Islam says that, but it's not true. Most of it is there are cultural ideas that people have translated into being a law and a religious law. And we have been able to get the ulamas, the big council of ulamas in the state, to speak to them and say that this is what the Quran says, this is what the Sharia law says, and this is how it should be done. And fantastically, Islam actually gives women a lot of rights that people do not realize. So we're very keen and eager to publicize these laws and the guidance of the council so that women will get to know their rights and do it in a way that is not offensive to the society. That doesn't mean that they should be victims, they should allow themselves to be victims. And of course, with the VAP Act, we're able to provide places of succor where they can go to and seek help or assistance if they're going through any form of violence.
And if there's one thing I believe we've been able to achieve in Ekiti State, is to be able to send a strong message that we will not tolerate these acts of impunity against women and girls. Of course, there's still a lot to be done. Yeah. Of course, we still get cases every day. But because people now know that there is a place they can go to, that they'll be listened to, that the government is taking this seriously, people are now coming forward with different kinds of cases. We have whistleblowers all over the place. So it seems as if these acts are working. And so political will is absolutely key.
And I think that it seems as there's been a great collaboration. I would like to show our viewers this video from the Nigerian Governor's Wives Against Gender-Based Violence. Take a look at this.
We promise to sensitize parents.
We promise to advocate for laws and policies against gender-based violence.
To work with religious and traditional leaders.
We promise to advocate for treatment, care and protection of gender-based violence survivors.
Let us all work together to eradicate gender-based violence in Nigeria. We promise to use our voices to demand for a society free of gender-based violence. Enough is enough.
All right, welcome back. You are still watching the International Women's Month special on Rubbing Minds. My name is Balanle Olukani, and I'm so glad because, you know, in that video, when I've watched the entirety of it, and I can see that it's not just the two of you, it's a conglomerate of, you know, the governor's wives across the states. In terms of pulling everyone together, what's the process like in making sure that you're all on the same page, you know, when you're putting your agenda forward for the Nigerian Governor's Wives Against Gender-Based Violence? We all giggle. Because, and the reason why I asked that is because every state is at different places, and there are also different, initiatives.
Okay, let me
need
take
to be
that,
passed.
and because Erelu she might be modest about
Yeah.
it. So, like she explained to you, we came together last year to start this forum formally.
Yeah.
Before that, the First Lady, Her Excellency Haji Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, had been doing a lot of advocacy around gender-based violence, and we had worked with her, but we did not have a formal group of us together. So when we came together as a group with Erelu as the chairperson, and as we all know, she is a leading expert in the field of gender-based violence, and Ekiti State is a state that is role model states for all of us, and we look to emulate how they have been able to deal with it under with their laws, and then of course under her guidance. There are so many times when I have to go to her on my WhatsApp and say, hey, look at this law, this is how they wrote it, and she will either say, oh, leave it, it's fine, let me run it by my AG and let me do this and do that. And that is helpful when you have somebody that knows what she is doing and is an expert in the field, and she can bring us all together. Of course, we're women, and there are times when, the response is not equal across board. And also, the other advantage of coming together as a group is that states like ours that have been quite reticent, or they're not as keen to pass these laws for various reasons, the Governors Forum were able to speak to all the governors without any exceptions, and the resolution was made and they issued a state of emergency. Now, we wrote a memo, but I'm sure that there was a lot of talk in the other room that got that going for us at the Governors Forum. So we do use that strength, and it helps us a lot.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because in your, Governors Vice Forum, the International Women's Day statement, there was a line that really stuck out to me, and I just want to go ahead and read it. And you said that, as a statement, you said that you will continue to remind your husbands of their obligations to women, to society, to security. What does that process look like when you're trying to remind, to us, this is a governor, to us, this is someone that, is in a position of authority, but these are your partners, your life partners. How do you remind them that, honey, this law, it's very important? What does that process look like in terms of navigating and advocating for issues such as women's rights?
Right. Well, I could be theoretical about it, and I could be very practical.
Yeah.
I could be theoretical and say it is our responsibility, as spouses, to remind our husbands that there are certain things that need to be done to ensure that no one is left behind.
Right.
And the practical issues are, we are the ones, the spouses, who these families come to in Ekiti State. And you will remember when, when you were with us, people would literally bring their daughters to my office, even before taking them to the police station or to the hospital. They'll bring them to my office, insisting that they need to see me because they know that they will get justice. These issues land on our doorsteps. Every day we have to deal with these issues. Today we are giving out some support to survivors of gender-based violence across the country. That's one of the things we said we would do for International Women's Day.
Right.
And we, out of the 40 odd grants we are giving to these survivors across the country, at least 35 of them have to do with rape and sexual assault. They bring these directly to our doorstep. And so we believe that we have to let our husbands know that there's something that needs to be done at a systemic level. We can't keep dealing with the symptoms. By the time they show up, the damage is done. We need our husbands to ensure that there are laws in place. We need them to ensure that the laws are fully implemented with all the political will and resources that requires. And we need to be able to hold meaningful conversations with communities so that they own the issue. There's only so much advocacy we can do on our own. But we need to engage communities. My sister, Excellency Kebi, spoke about talking with the ulamas. We need to talk to religious leaders of all persuasions. We need to deal with traditional rulers. We need to deal with parents, with teachers, with everyone who has a stake in ensuring that we have communities and society is free of all forms of violence, or so that they know that we will not become a country that tolerates rape and sexual assault as a culture or as a way of life. That should not be. And so, as we mark International Women's Day with the hashtag Choose to Challenge,
Yes,
as Nigerian governors' wives, we choose to challenge gender-based violence. We choose to challenge all forms of discrimination against women and girls.
Wow, I think that's a perfect way to go on a quick break. This conversation continues. I am so glad to be here learning and also understanding exactly what it means to be in a position of authority and use it to advocate for the rights of women. I'm here with the First Lady of Ekiti State, Erelu Bisi-Fayemi, and the First Lady of Kebbi State, Dr. Zainab Shinkafi Bagudu. We'll be right back after this.
Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.
Welcome back to this special International Women's Day episode on Rubbing Minds. My name is Balanle. I want to start with you, Dr. Bagudu. I want to talk about the state of women's rights. You know, how would you rate the state of women's rights in Nigeria?
Well, it's not where we would like it to be. It's not, we're not in a country where women are at parity with their male counterparts, right from childhood into adulthood. We see the discrepancy in females that are in elective positions, females that are in government positions, and the affirmative action is nowhere near being met in Nigeria. The 35% that is recommended, I think we're currently at 6 or 8% in between that. So as you can well imagine, in the core northern states, it's even more difficult because we have to be practical and honest that the culture is different. And when in our previous conversation, when we spoke about helping each other, one of the things that is up to me as a leader, as a mother in my state, is to be practical and sensible. I cannot just come to the table or come to His Excellency the Governor and say, look, they've done this in Ekiti State, so we have to do it in Kebbi. You must contextualize what you're aiming for. So in as much as we would like to aim for a world where we have gender parity and equity, and the inequities, particularly in the development sectors, healthcare, education, that's a very important one, and empowerment. So all these, we would like to see it closed. There are programs that all the states engage in and push forward, but it is not where it should be. And that is why we use days like the International Women's Day today to highlight these inequities.
It's interesting because Dr. Bagudu mentioned, affirmative action. And I had an interesting conversation, and I want to get your thoughts on this, as a leader when it comes to advocating for women's rights, even outside of what you do as a governor's wife. Do you think affirmative action is important? Do you think it's something that should be pushed forward? And the reason why I say that is on one of the episodes that I've had this month, we had someone who felt like they believed as a woman, she said affirmative action is crippling to women. And I thought that was an interesting perspective. So based on your experience advocating for women's rights, what do you say about that?
Right, okay, I'll respond to that. But to take a step back to the question you started out with, where are we with regards to women's rights in Nigeria? Over the past 10 years, Nigeria has performed woefully on all indices that measure gender equality and women's empowerment. If you look at the figures that have come in from the World Bank, from UNDP, from the World Economic Forum, we are not doing well at all. And as Her Excellency Kebbi has said, in all the indices with political participation, with healthcare, with education and training, with economic empowerment, any kind of indices you want to use to measure, we have failed woefully. Now, when it comes to the issue of access to political participation and decision making, that is one area in which quite a number of African countries have been able to do very well. And it has made a difference in terms of the status of women in those countries and the capacity of those countries to push the agenda around gender equality and gender parity. If you take countries like South Africa, like Namibia, like Rwanda, like Uganda, and more recently, a couple of years ago, Kenya, these are countries who have used affirmative action and quotas to level the playing field. Here in Nigeria, we are supposedly the giant of Africa, and we have less than 5% of women in the National Assembly. There are some state houses of assembly in Nigeria where you have no woman at all. Granted, we have seen quite a number of women in public life across all sectors, the business sector, the academic sector, in politics and governance and so on. But that is such a tiny minority compared to the vast majority of women who will never have their voices heard. So affirmative action is critical. Affirmative action is key. What kind of democracy, what kind of governance will we say we are having if the door is shut on 50% of the population? And by the way, I hope people remember that Nigeria did not meet any of the original Millennium Development Goals. Now we have the Sustainable Development Goals. The rate at which we are going, we are not going to achieve most of those goals either by the year 2030. And most of that will be due to the fact that we are not paying enough attention to gender equality and women's empowerment.
We're going on a quick break. When we come back, Rubbing Minds continues.
We place a spotlight on some women who paved the way for many women in Nigeria. They are no longer with us, but we appreciate and applaud these sheroes. In 2014, the world was plagued by the Ebola virus, and it was with the help of a few professionals that it was contained. Ameyo Adadevo led the team who supervised the treatment of Patrick Sawyer, a Liberian, the first patient diagnosed with Ebola in Nigeria, despite the lack of protective equipment. Adedavo's heroic efforts saved the nation from widespread infection in a time when several Nigerian doctors were on strike. The professionalism and thorough medical examination carried out by Dr. Ameyo Adadevo was impeccable. As a result of her report, the Nigerian government declared a national public health emergency, and the Nigerian Ministry of Health set up an Ebola Emergency Operations Center. She died on the 19th of August 2014, but her work was so immense in the fight against Ebola that she has won several posthumous awards, and the film 93 Days by Bolanle Austin Peters was created in her honor.
Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.
Welcome back. You're watching Rubbing Minds. When we look at our country, and we have so many different challenges, but when it comes to gender equality, gender parity, how can it be addressed in a practical way where we're going to ensure that both men and women are on par?
Well, we need to start by looking at the legislative policy frameworks that need to be in place. We do have some legislations and policies. We need a whole lot more. But what we do have is we have the Constitution, for whatever that is worth, and there are supposed to be constitutional amendments or constitutional reforms happening now. And the issue of gender equality and women's empowerment is supposed to be a part of that. And the feedback we are getting is that it seems to be something that is still elusive. People are still trying to push that off the table. We have the National Gender Policy, which was first put in place in 2005 and revised in 2015. Every state in the country is supposed to take the National Gender Policy to use as a roadmap for how to address women's empowerment in their different states. The first state in Nigeria to domesticate the National Gender Policy was Ekiti State in 2011. And since then, I believe just 2 other states have done so. I believe Jigawa is one, I've forgotten the other, but we don't have more than 3 states in the Federation who have domesticated the National Gender Policy. Then we have the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law. We've had a bit more luck with that. partly as a result of the advocacy that's been done through the Nigeria Governors Forum. So as we speak, there are at least 20 states out of 36 who have domesticated the VAP Act, and we are convinced that before the end of 2021, there will be more. Then we have the Child Rights Act, which has been domesticated by, I think, all states in southern Nigeria, some states in northern Nigeria, but not all. So there's still a lot of work that's being done on that. We need to intensify efforts on these policy frameworks and legal and policy frameworks, because that is what can ensure that we have the roadmaps in place, the resources in place, and the political will to follow through on all these issues. And then another important thing with regards to ensuring that we address women's rights in this way is there has to be a commitment, especially on behalf of the federal and state governments, to strengthening the gender machineries that we have at the national level and at state level. From my experience, it's not just a Nigerian issue. Working with gender machineries across the African continent, they're usually the least resourced in terms of financial resources, human resources, material resources.
When you say gender machineries, can you break that down?
The ministries of Women Affairs and Social Development, that's what we mean by gender machineries. They are usually the least resourced in terms of access to financial resources. The budget of many ministries of women's affairs is one budget line in the Ministry of Health or Ministry of Works, the entire budget for many ministries of women's affairs. So we need to pay attention to how we strengthen the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs in terms of its budget, in terms of their personnel, in terms of the technical skills and resources they're supposed to have, and also at state level as well. If we do not do that, it means that every political season, if there are people like us who are passionate about these issues, once we leave the scene, if those institutions have not been strengthened, then everything is going to fall flat, because they will see these things as pet projects, as personal projects of first lady this or first lady that. But if we strengthen these institutions, then it means that on an ongoing basis, there is a commitment to ensuring that there will be implementation in the state, and those who need to have access to certain resources will have the access.
Yeah. So how do we transition from, as a young woman, and I say this because even I think of, my peers and my colleagues and the mindset of what a woman's role is in society. So when you're thinking about, you've gone to school, yes, I made sure my daughter went to school, I made sure she got her education, but there's still a heavy emphasis placed on the fact that women must become wives, they must become mothers, and empowerment is not as important. Do you believe that that concept is a tradition that is holding us back and, can be evolved? Or is it something that it doesn't really matter? It needs to be moved away.
Well, we live in deeply patriarchal societies.
I didn't want to use the word, but I figured you'd bring it up.
Yes, we live in these deeply patriarchal societies which use culture, tradition, and religion to determine women's roles and determine the kind of space or the kind of voice that they can have. And it's throughout their life cycle. I usually make this joke because I ran a workshop once a couple of years ago, and I asked a group of women, can you tell me something from your culture which gives you an idea that you are not the same, that you don't have the same rights as men have? And then someone said, well, in my culture, on the 8th day, when the baby is born, if the baby is a boy, on the 8th day, they kill a goat. If it's a girl, on the 8th day, they kill a chicken. So that tells you a lot. The difference between the value of a goat and the value of a chicken. And that's how we are socialized into believing that as women, we are less than. We don't have the same right to a voice. We don't have the same right to space. And even when we go to school with boys, even when we go to work with men, even when we aspire for positions with men, there's always something that tells us that we are just not enough. Whatever position we are in, we need to ensure that we do what we can to empower the women around us, to ensure that they have a voice. And let people know that, yes, women can do a lot of things. They can hold down careers. They can hold down families. They can do, the sky is the limit. If we do not place limits on what men can accomplish, why do we want to do the same for women? I was raised by a father who consistently told me that there's nothing that I cannot do. And I wish all men were like my father and they could raise their daughters with confidence and self-esteem.
You know, if you go online, you will see the backlash against the advancement of women's rights and our ability to have agency in society.
Yeah, but it's not limited to just the African society or to Nigeria. That backlash is global. I agree that ours is worse, but it all stems from our upbringing and our culture. And people do believe it, but it's very difficult to overcome it. I do not think we are going to be able to see a total switch in our lifetimes. It's a very long and in-depth process, and it's going to take a long time. And we also need, what I feel is that at the brunt of all this, I'm a medical person, but I always say the first goal or the first sector of development that we must address to improve the lots of women and girls is education. When a girl is educated up to primary school level, the maternal mortality of the country drastically reduces by up to 40%. And as you go higher, it gets more and more and more, you know, the reduction in rates. So that education has a direct relationship with the mindset of that people that think of things like patriarchal.
That's true.
society.
An educated person will be able to understand, you know, these concepts that we're speaking. Hopefully the education is actually sound as well. Thank you very much, ma'am. We're going to go on a quick break. We'll be right back after this.
Wanna get with you. Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.
Welcome back to Rubbing Minds. Now, I want us to go straight right into this next topic of conversation because we've talked about, you know, women's rights. We've talked about the girl child and her access to education. And I want us to talk about women empowerment. Now, you know, we see a lot of different initiatives that are happening. So there's skills acquisition, you know, whether it's learning how to do a trade or learning how to make some sort of product to sell. And we realized that last year, COVID put women way far behind in terms of increasing the gap in poverty between men and women. How effective do you think, you know, the skills acquisition programs are based on your experiences? And of course, we're all aware of the stark reality of poverty in Nigeria.
Well, I know that people have a lot to say about empowerment programs, especially in our communities where you give out grinding machines and sewing machines and you run skills acquisition programs and like tie and dye, soap making and so on. My take on that is it's important to address women's practical needs in those terms. So giving them those tools and items for them to be able to go out and make a living for themselves is important. But for me, what is even more important is addressing the systemic issues that keep women in poverty, that keep them marginalized, and that keep this, what I refer to as a cycle of generational poverty going. And so it's okay to give a woman a sewing machine, but of what benefit is that sewing machine if, for example, she's going to go home every night to be beaten? Right. So we need to address more strategic issues in relation to, you know, women's empowerment, such as, you know, access to education, as my sister has just said, such as ensuring, as we said earlier, that we have laws in place to protect women from violence, and that we have institutions that can address those issues as well, such as sexual assault referral centers, as well as shelters should women in distress need them. Women also need access to land. If women are farming, or if women are farmers, for example, and they're farming land that they'll never own because the culture in that community does not allow women to own land, how can you empower such a woman on a sustainable basis? So women need access to those kinds of resources, land, to capital, for them to be able to start businesses.
Yeah, I mean, very well said, and I think there's so many different, thoughts on this, in the fact that, yes, at this very moment, this person needs some sort of financial, empowerment. What are your thoughts on it, Dr. Babadu?
Well, to be honest, I used to be one of those that used to scoof at those sewing machines and things. But now that I am in a position where I have to do something, I'm not just an onlooker, I am a doer, and one of those that are acting to change the lives of women and even young men. They are necessary. What are we going to give the women in the rural areas? Computers? Laptops? It's not going to work. You have to give them implements that they can use. And if we don't, or we can just not give them at all, and say we need to educate them and we need to teach them, and we wait for all our laws and everything to be put in place and all the bandits to be stopped and everything, how do they feed? How do they sustain themselves? How do they send their children to school? It's a cycle. For some, it might not be as good as it will be, but we hope that it will be better for their daughters. So if we give her that sewing machine and the grinding machine, she can use it to send her daughter to school. She can chip into the family income, the whole pool in the family, while we keep on sorting out all the other things. So they're very necessary, and most of all, they're welcome. And it makes the women happy, it makes them productive, it makes them able to do something. Yes, there's skill acquisition classes as well, but you have to give a startup. What we do differently, it's getting better. Nowadays, we do some business training skills as well in the local languages, in the local context, the way they will understand it, so that they can access small loans or grants and do a lot of information dissemination around those initiatives that come up, like the Survival Fund. A lot of women benefited from it in my state, and they're not educated women, but this is through the power of media and using the boys around and the other people around to go around and actually help them fill those forms, and they got their alerts. It worked. So these are all the things that it's not a bad thing, but we can organize it better. We can work on all the other background factors that will make life better for not just the women but the men as well.
Years ago, when these issues were a big debate in Women and Development, and a lot of Western feminists were trying to create these dichotomies between women's practical needs and strategic needs, and de-emphasizing the importance of having direct empowerment tools that we are talking about, with the focus being more on systemic issues. Right. It took me coming back to the continent and working across different countries in Africa, and then being in the position I'm in now, to realize how important these practical things are. Last year, one of our colleagues gave out empowerment materials to women in our state, and it included sachets of pure water for them to start a pure water business. Right. You should have seen the backlash and the derision online. It was nauseating. And I was thinking, these people who are sitting in their comfortable offices in Abuja, in Lagos, or Port Harcourt, typing all this, do they understand what it's like to be a woman living in poverty in a remote part of the country? These are the things we are faced with on a daily basis. So I don't think we should ever discourage people from doing those things. And actually, I think we are appealing to Nigerians. You can support people in your community from wherever you are. You don't have to be a first lady. You don't have to be a top government official, but with whatever little you have, find out what it is women in your community need. Is it grinding machines? Is it sewing machines? Is it, vocational skills training, and sponsor something? But as I said earlier, we also need to keep working, trying to encourage our husbands to address the systemic issues, because we don't want to keep doing these stopgap measures forever. But people should stop deriding these interventions. They're absolutely critical, and we need to be aware of how much women in particular need them in our communities.
We all know, we're all aware that being a governor's wife, it's not a political position, you know. But when you think of the role and you think of the kind of legacy you want to leave behind, what does that look like to you?
Well, I want to be remembered, first of all, as being a supportive spouse, under whose administration there was advancement for the women, for the men, and everybody in the states. We do have a lot of firsts in Kebbi State. For instance, we have 23 elected female local government councillors, which is very unusual across the country. So I think we would like to be remembered for doing more of those things and for creating an enabling environment, a peaceful one. Kebbi is one of the, in fact, it's on record as the safest state in Nigeria. So a state where women were able to thrive better and do much better.
Okay, thank you.
And of course, the health indices.
And then of course, I mean,
the
work that you've done with mental health is amazing. Irelu, what about you?
Well, yes, I believe I'd like my legacy to be that of a spouse who supported her husband to accomplish all the goals he set and to fulfill all the promises that he made to the people of the state. I would like to be remembered for, people keep saying that to me all the time, so I own it. I'd like to be remembered for my passion for women and the love I have for everyone regardless of their circumstances, and the fact that Ekiti State today has about the most comprehensive laws and policies in the country to promote gender equality and women's empowerment. These issues will not be resolved in one day or in one administrative term, but they are there with institutions that we have created in the state, such as having a sexual assault referral center, a 208-bed transit home for women and girls, a place, the Fumiola Inca Diagnostic Center, where women can go to for diagnostics around all forms of cancer, and a whole range of resources like that, both at state level and local government level. So I'd like to be remembered as someone who took her position seriously, did not take it for granted, and who was invested in ensuring that other women also come on board so that we can claim these successes together.
Brilliant. Wow, thank you so much. I have to say it was such an honor to be able to sit down and have this conversation with you. Before we go, the theme is Choose to Challenge, so I want to find out, individually, as women, I know you're always representing your state, but as individuals, what would you say you're choosing to challenge?
All forms of gender inequities, health, education, political decision-making process. I choose to challenge all forms of gender inequities.
I choose to challenge all forms of injustice. All forms of injustice that render women voiceless, that render women without choices, and that render women second-class citizens throughout their life cycles. I challenge that.
So do you have a message to Nigerian women? Is there anything, you can look directly to the cameras, if you have a message that you'd like to pass across directly?
Well, my message is simple, is never forget who you are and work hard at who you want to become, and you will definitely get there.
My message is, let us be our sister's keeper. Let us bring out our wrappers for one another, our wrappers of compassion, solidarity, empathy, and unity. If we stand together, then we'll be able to accomplish great things together, regardless of the obstacles.
This has been a Rubbing Minds special all month, which is featuring amazing Amazon women who are doing exciting and amazing things in their fields. My name is Bolanle Olukoni, and this special edition is powered by Lipton. We're going on a quick break. When we come back, Rubbing Minds continues.
The achievements of Queen Amina of Zaria are so unreal that they are often regarded as folk tales. However, in 1576, Amina ascended to the position of queen. Amina waged a 34-year campaign against her neighbors meant to expand Zazzau territory. Her army consisted of 20,000 foot soldiers and 1,000 cavalry troops. Amina was a warrior queen that kept expanding her region of what is now known as Kaduna. She was revered for her strategy and military prowess, and her work and exploits, however obscure, are still a source of inspiration to women and girls for how they can rise up the ranks even in a patriarchal society.
Wanna get with you. Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.
In the last 3 weeks, Lipton has raised the mark to women in unusual careers on Rubbing Minds. These women aren't given in to societal expectations. They've chosen to eat the unexpected for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This week, we met a lady mechanic who's both young and clear that she wants nothing else more than to be a mechanic.
My name is Okoli Precious Chinaza, female mechanic to be precise.
It sounds so empowering hearing her introduce herself. But were there hurdles when she started off? Did Precious get the support of her family?
It's been empowering in the sense that when I get thumbs up from people that, wow, I really love what you do, get words of encouragement from people, and also from my mom, I say she has really been the brain behind this. Because when I started all, I told my dad, and it was like, why are you going into this and all of that? Then I started giving him reasons why, because it has always been my passion. I've always had this, dream of becoming one someday from growing up as a child. And my mom has, she's been my backup so far. And my friends as well, although I never studied that in school, it's nothing related to what I'm studying in school.
We did not hesitate to ask Precious the lady mechanic the type of cars she specialized on. And with so much sprite, she responded with this.
I'm specialized mainly in Japanese. I don't do German, Toyota and the rest.
Precious, who is almost too modest about her work, felt so empowered by this feedback from a random person on her work and from her neighbors just seeing her fix her dad's car.
My inspiring story. So, I could remember there was a day I was in the house. And then, I don't know who she is, a random person. And then came to the house and was like, I'm looking for so and so person. I was in the house, I was listening to the conversation, but then I wanted to get to the end of the discussion, so it doesn't look like I just bumped like that. Okay, and she walks in so place, because nobody knows where I work and nobody knows what I do in my house. Then I was so surprised. She come into the house and like, okay, I'm looking for Precious, this, that. She does this and all of that. And then she was saying so many good things about me, and it was like me having butterflies in my belly. Wow, so somebody can actually say this. And many other inspiring stories like that, but that was the only one that I could hold up, because being a random person saying something good about you, someone you've not even seen before, and then the person is saying all good about you, it's like a thumbs up from my own side. What did the person say? Okay, I love the way she does her things, charisma and everything. Being a female, because I do my dad's car, I repair my dad's car in the compound, and it's always like people watching how I go about doing them and all of that. So I had no idea people were watching me doing all of that, because I don't like doing things or making it so obvious to people when I do my things. I like being secretive about my things. So I was so surprised.
Bolanle all month long on this Rubbing Minds International Women's Month special with Lipton has asked all the unusual women who's been on the show, what do you choose to challenge?
The theme for this month for International Women's Month is choose to challenge. What are you choosing to challenge?
Well, I choose to challenge most women out there that thinks there are no jobs in Nigeria.
I'm challenging the government. I want the government. Nigeria is more like a classic country, but the government are giving pro-max laws.
And now, let's ask Precious what she's choosing to challenge.
I choose to challenge every female out there who is aspiring or who wants to go into one field or the other, no matter what it is, do not let people's opinion overshadow yours, no matter what it is. The profession I choose for myself has been stereotyped as a profession meant for men only. So you as a lady, being a mechanic, carpentry, whatsoever, do not let people's opinion overshadow yours, and do not let people tell you. Because then it always was like, when I tell people that, okay, this is what I do, they'll be like, why in God's name are you doing this? You can go into makeup, you can go into tailoring. There are 1,001 things you can do as a lady. Why choose a mechanic? Do you know doing this, at some point you grow muscle, you do this, you do that. It's like you won't look girly anymore. And funny enough, someone said, getting a husband is going to be very, very hard for you, because no man will want to marry someone who one day start giving him punches and all as a result of the heavy things you do, going on that vehicles, looking dirty and all of that. So I'm challenging every lady, every woman, every girl growing up who wishes to be like me. Just do your thing. Do what you know how to do best, and just leave the rest for God. Those negative comments I get from people get to me, no doubt. Many a times I cry like, why am I even doing this? At some point I would start weighing my options if I should continue with this. But then this is something you have passion for. This is what has keep you moving. This is what gives you joy whenever you do that. So I see no reason why what people say should get to you. You just have to keep moving. It doesn't matter. Just filter them. Just like you boiling rice, and then when it's time for you to parboil, that's how it looks like.
It must be tough being female and a mechanic, but Precious is owning it like a boss. And for that, Lipton is raising a mug to her. Thank you, Precious. Over to you, Bolanle.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.
And on that note, another happy International Women's Day. This has been a Rubbing Minds special all month, which is featuring amazing Amazon women who are doing exciting and amazing things in their fields. My name is Bolanle Olukoni, and this special edition is powered by Lipton. I'll see you next week.